Right, I can see we've got a few more in. For those that are supporting on this, please continue to monitor people joining and let them in accordingly. For those watching this as a recording, then you can skip through and zoom forward to the interesting bits. So, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining. Thank you to the support teams and thank you to the speakers. And we're going to move through a quick introduction from the people that will be talking today and doing some demonstrations, and then get into some question and answers around the key topics. By the time you leave this session, you should have gained a practical understanding of strategies for cost optimization, some insights into market leading tools for the analysis, and some expert advice on delivery and risk management. And as I said, towards the end, we're going to do a live demo. So if you are watching this as part of a recording, obviously it won't be live, but it still should be interesting. So we're all excited to see that at the end. So Kev, I'm going to come to you for a quick introduction about who you are and a brief overview of what you're going to cover today.
Thanks, Sean. Hey, everybody, I'm Kevin Webb. I sit in Ingram Micro's cloud services team, specifically focused on AWS and business development with our strategic partners. We work very closely to ensure our partners can leverage the funding incentives from the hyperscalers to make migrations an interesting and attractive proposition.
Fantastic, thank you. And Paul Rhodes?
Paul Rhodes, one of the directors at Perform Partners. I've had extensive experience of program managing large and small complex migrations over the last 10 years. I'll be talking about how we have come to approach any type of migration and what the common challenges we've seen over and over again in different migrations.
Brilliant, thank you. Paul Gordon.
Yeah, Paul Gordon, product marketing leader at Matilda Cloud, here with my colleague Eric, and we're excited to share our platform with you and talk about customer benefits from our assessments and automation throughout the journey to cloud excellence.
Brilliant, thanks Paul. And Eric?
Yeah, nice to meet you all. Eric Schlegel, engineer with Matilda Cloud. So I'll be walking through a demonstration of our platform and our automated assessment and migration abilities.
Fantastic, I look forward to that. And it's worth calling out as well, Paul and Eric, you're joining us from the other side of the pond, so it's nice and early for you guys. So yeah, thank you very much for accommodating this. And I'm Sean Walsh, so I'm also one of the co-founders and directors at Perform Partners, heavily engaged in enterprise scale migrations, working with big customers and the hyperscalers, covering AWS, Microsoft, and our partners Ingram Micro as well. So today we'll be weaving a bit of a story around why now's a critical time to understand what you've got in your estates, how you can get the best use of it, and what your options are. So with that in mind, Kevin, coming to you, why is now a critical moment for organizations to rethink their tech strategy?
It's a complex landscape, Sean, right? And it's forever changing. But right now, there's a huge amount of uncertainty amongst a certain set of customers that received some enforced changes, right, when Broadcom acquired VMware. This has driven large dissatisfaction. I mean, Gartner conducted a poll recently, right? 74% VMware customers now exploring alternatives. You know, and the hyperscalers listen and respond, right? Market is a dynamic thing. You know, needless to say, you know, on top of the standard like MAP funding program from AWS, which is designed to, you know, help accelerate migrations, there's now strategic pricing incentives available to both partners and customers, right? In terms of migrating these workloads into AWS. So, you know, if nothing else, follow the money, Sean, right? The timing is now.
So there's been market shifts, as there always is with change, moving one thing from another. But it sounds like there's a real opportunity for customers that are evaluating where they're spending their money. It's where to get the most value out of it and how that aligns with their ongoing strategy to give them more options fundamentally.
And you can avoid vendor lock-in, right? You know, the technology exists. The conversation is there just to be had.
Yeah, avoiding vendor lock-in. That sounds key. So it's good to know that customers have potentially got more options and some more funding available to do it. I think we'll touch more on that later. If they were to get into it and start thinking about moving things, and this, Paul Rose, this is coming to you from a delivery perspective, what would a typical migration delivery look like?
From our perspective, it always starts with understanding and agreeing those high-level business outcomes. What does the customer or the company want to achieve, the organization, and what does success look like? So once we've got clarity on that, we can start to move forward in terms of everybody else understanding and being on the same page, which is critical in terms of delivery and getting buy-in across all your stakeholders within that organization. Another key thing that we always focus on is we base it all on risk. So we approach migrations based on the risk appetite of the organization we're working with, and also understanding what those constraints are so we can mitigate those constraints early to ensure successful and speedy migrations. So from an approach perspective, it's very, very risk-based how we approach it.
Yeah.
And very high in communications and stakeholder involvement, because we haven't seen any fail, but I've read a lot of material where things have failed, and we take those things on board in terms of, and a lot of it is around not understanding the risks that you're entering into, and not keeping all your stakeholders within that organization involved in and clear on what the end goal is.
Yeah. So we're talking about their engagement right through the organization. I think what's starting to be commonly called the golden thread, maybe starting with the why are we doing this, then figuring out what the options are, and then what kind of about an analysis phase. I've observed deliveries over the years where some companies have started things and then they've stalled because they haven't got the data, or they've made assumptions, or there's some systems sitting there that only one person knows how to operate.
It's part of one. So we tend to, I mean, I mentioned earlier on that we'll talk about common challenges, and I'll come to detailed discovery, but that is a frequent and common challenge for actually organizations not really understanding the estate they have, their as-is position. That causes numerous problems further down the line if that isn't fully understood, because you tend to find it's manageable, but it's a scary place to be that can be made much more comfortable if you understand it much earlier on. There are other common challenges that we see. Again, it comes out of discovery, and it's usually understood by then through the discovery phase, around data sovereignty, how people, organizations will adapt to this new way of working, how licensing complexities can trip you up mid, if not fully understood, trip you up mid migration, and legacy technology challenges. Again, the common theme here is actually understanding that as is position.
Yeah. With that in mind, I suppose maybe not too long ago, that would have had to be approached maybe manually, talking to people, looking at asset databases, working through it, making the associations, looking at the firewall rules, what's that application doing. But I understand that we've got more options now. So if we're looking at it from a customer's perspective and wanting to know what's in their estate, what the options are, maybe Kev relating back to, once we know those options, that can tie in with the funding available and the onward design. So Paul Gordon, coming to you here then, where do tools like Matilda Cloud fit into this journey for the customers?
It's a great question. I think that what we're going to find as we look at this is that this conversation about risk and continuity is really critical in the story about why Matilda Cloud. So I'm going to share a couple slides with everyone just to get an idea of what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
But Matilda Cloud is a strategic partner of all the different clouds, especially with AWS, Azure, and OCI. We've been recognized in the industry by other firms like Gartner and our extensive partner network. We're technology agnostic, and so we can assess any on-prem cloud or hybrid multi-cloud estate and consider different migration options into different targets. So we've created this, what we are confident is the industry's most comprehensive and powerful assessment engine. And it's powered by AI to automate every phase of the journey and do it at scale with this factory model that reduces downtime. So, our kind of core thesis is that we believe that technology investments should serve business outcomes, as Paul was talking about, and not that we all just need to instantly adopt the latest technology. And so these investments should keep businesses agile and responsive to change, and they should also prioritize application success and continuity. So our platform gives a lot of recommendations, it gives a lot of insights. So every recommendation that our platform provides keeps the client compliant and secure and follows industry standards. And the whole goal here is to mitigate risk throughout the process. So when we look at VMware in particular, and really, our platform is flexible, it has a lot of use cases. But for VMware in particular, when we look at what options a customer has, we mentioned the manual, but the reality is, manual processes for assessment and migration, they're really slow, painful. There's tons of human error possibilities. We don't know what the project is going to look like when we begin to undertake it. We have to take people away from what would otherwise be important roles and focus them on assessment. And so this is really unpredictable, and really it's very risky, and doing nothing is easier. But when we look at what tools are available to address this, we look throughout the industry, there are a lot of tools that are siloed or that only handle one particular part of the journey from the assessment to migration. And then there are a lot of really fast migration approaches that, yes, they are fast and they can quickly get you to a target cloud, but they are maybe only specific to AWS, and they only really do VMware to EC2 or something like this. And the reason we see these tools that exist like this is because they're very good at optimizing what's in the cloud, but they are comfortable taking a risk of moving everything quickly to the cloud and then seeing what problems arise and then working on solving those. And so these approaches in total, they create these hidden costs. They have scalability issues. There's still human error introduced when you have interoperability challenges. And worst of all, teams have difficulty aligning on these because they have not eliminated enough risk, really, when it comes down to it. And so what Matilda Cloud does is unique compared to these approaches. Our platform creates this very comprehensive view of the existing environment, all of the applications, all of the infrastructure and services, and maps all of the dependencies. And by mapping out the existing environment in the way we do, we're able to consider different configurations, how this could be moved, what approaches are most feasible or best, what waves we should be moving these applications and workloads in. And that allows the customer to stop and consider their plan and take the most detailed approach, or create a detailed plan that is the right approach for them, rather. And so what our approach, the benefits of the approach we take is that it's still very cost efficient and fast. It avoids hidden costs. You get an optimized deployment earlier in the process rather than having to optimize later. And this detailed plan with predictable outcomes tremendously lowers the risk of the project. The assessment is comprehensive and gives the client a very detailed view of their environment and allows them to take a flexible approach. That is, if it's the timeline that's most important, they can do it very quickly. If it's the accuracy and the minimized downtime, they can prioritize those in their business outcomes. And the tools are easy to use. They're highly scalable. the more complex or large the project, the higher the value of the automation we provide. And then one of the greatest things is there's a lot of these hyperscaler funding options to take advantage of that lower the cost barriers and further reduce the risk for the client. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions so far, and I can keep going.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. It's a good summary. I think if I was to reflect it back from a customer's perspective, it's a non-intrusive tool. The outcomes that I'll get from it is potentially more information that I've got now, and that can be used to inform my strategies for migrating based on what event I'm working towards. And that could be something like, say, a data center exit. It could be moving off some workloads that have maybe doubled, tripled, or more gone up in cost. So you're resolving some licensing spend issue there. But really, you've got more information, so you've got more options on what to do with that. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think so. And I guess there's maybe questions around the journey, or we can talk about what a journey might look like next, and
yeah,
wherever you want to go with it.
For the audience and the people watching this back, what does a typical customer journey look like using this tool?
Yeah, so let's take a look at the tooling. So, we've created this suite of tools. Really, it's a single platform. And the benefit of our approach here is that we can do this upfront assessment and get a high-level overview, and then we do a deep assessment that understands what are all these dependencies and get a more accurate view of what the process would look like. Mm-hmm. And then the output of every one of these phases feeds as the input to the next phase. And so we're able to then take this very rich assessment from our deep assessment, for example, and use that to automate a lot of the tedious migration processes. One of the benefits of this approach as well is some customers might only want to do the assessment part, and that's fine. They don't have to use the integrated migration. Mm. But if there are, let's say, maybe there is a tremendous value to them in the automated migration, they can take advantage of the orchestration and migration as well. And then we do offer an ongoing real-time assessment that provides the year-long optimization process after arriving at the target, or can just be installed for an ongoing in-place assessment to determine where optimization is best. That has all kinds of benefits for cloud excellence. So a lot of customers, the most exciting place to start is to get this rapid assessment, which helps them get a high-level strategy up front, helps them with their decision-making, understanding what they're looking at here. A lot of customers don't know what they don't know. And so getting some of that level of awareness up front is really important. We use some models. You mentioned Gartner earlier. We use some models to be able to understand exactly what the customer is looking at. And, this agentless approach, there's no downtime, and the customers are able to focus on their business without taking their eye off their ongoing operations. The assessments run in the background and deliver powerful insights and help build a detailed plan that then is able to be employed in the migration should they choose to take that route.
It sounds quite light touch from a customer's perspective then. So,
I would say so. And so, this is one of our case studies that we've been talking about. There are, a lot of smaller projects that we could discuss. This is one of the largest that we've done. So this just gives you an example. This is one of the largest telecom customers or telecom enterprises in the United States. They had, in this case, it was this huge estate of multiple data centers with VMware workloads. The applications were distributed across data centers. This was before the VMware price increase. So they were facing, they just had a mess on their hands and a limited amount of understanding of what they were running. And they wanted to take advantage of the benefits of cloud. In this case, I believe they went to AWS. So what they did is they employed Matilda Discover to do this. I think it's like a 6-week long process in this case. It can run as little as 2 weeks. Depends on the customer and what their environment is like, what their level of risk tolerance is, as we mentioned earlier. But they ran Matilda Discover. They got this comprehensive assessment that identified all of the dependencies of their applications and proposed the move groups so that they would know which applications needed to be moved, in what order, to ensure business continuity. And so then they used our orchestration platform to plan those waves meticulously, create the automated movements that would carefully plan what steps will be taken at every phase, and then automatically generate the landing zones. So that's one of the benefits of our approach, is that this assessment integrates into the migration to create automation like the landing zone creation, generate infrastructure as code, and all the installation scripts that are needed for the move. And then our migration tool automatically it streamlines the migration process itself. So it replicates, authenticates, tests, and deploys cutover to minimize downtime. So in this case, this was a very large project, but they were able to migrate 5 times faster than they would have otherwise been able to do with limited tooling into cloud native, into, I think it was EKS, enhanced performance and scalability, streamline operations. And the whole process was hyper automated and extremely efficient compared to more manual approaches.
Yeah, there's some big numbers. And I'm assuming as well, because of the level of automation from building the landing zones to doing the migrations and the whole wrapper for it, that's putting less pressure on the internal teams that have inevitably got day jobs to do, working through backlogs, keeping the lights on anyway.
Yeah, when we're talking about how the Matilda strategy, we are working with partners like yourselves to really allow you to go in there and provide this high level of service to the customer, to be able to allow the customer to take a step back and let the tooling do all this powerful discovery, and let the partner be able to offer really valuable insights and automation and service to be able to take advantage of whatever benefits we discover. We don't want to necessarily say it has to be like this. We say, here is all the information. Now you can go and decide what to do with it, and if you want to take advantage of some of these automated steps. And I think there's a point that you're talking about, which is the non-intrusive nature of the assessment. And what that really means to us is we don't require the installation of agents or making changes inside the customer's systems to be able to gather the assessment data. So we give the customer this flexibility. We use an agentless approach. Our platform collects information from read-only access. We use external APIs or cloud APIs for our upfront assessment. So by scanning these configurations and this metadata that's already available in the environment, we don't disrupt the operations or create additional security risks. So yeah. Matilda's platform is, everything is encrypted at rest and in transit. We can install directly on the customer's environment, so it never has to leave the customer or the locality or the region. So it's very, very secure.
Yeah. And thinking about some of the conversations we have with customers, security is always up there, always will be. The friction for change as well. If I'm going to use a tool like this from a customer's perspective, what boards do I need to go to get the approval? If that's an agent install, sometimes you're looking at months for that, dependent on the size of the organization. And then right up there, probably moving further up the list, is cost. And this sounds like a great tool. And Kev, I'm going to come to you on this as well. You see this at a global level, across multiple customers in different sectors. How much does it cost? How much does it cost for customers to use this to get the advantage out of it?
Broadly speaking, Sean, and generally, it doesn't. There are exceptions. There's a qualification criteria, but there is a established program with AWS around the optimization licensing assessment. And as you know, we work together on the CVA, the Cloud Viability Assessment. We take the output from that tooling, the funding from the vendor, we run the assessment, in a very light touch environment for the customer. On the back of that comes a very comprehensive report, but it'll go a stage further than that. We'll look as well at what does the high level design look like for this potential environment, and talk to me about the 7 R's, right? The case for change, the refactor, replatform, rehost, etc. Right? Certain applications lend themselves to certain behaviors or options. Other ones that can be monolithic and incredibly complex take a huge amount of unpacking.
Yeah.
And some complex thought and consultancy around what it is the customer can do, but it's all founded in a funded vendor assessment, which is a fairly easy thing to kick off, right? I mean, we've done this many times, together in recent months, and and to Paul's point earlier, it can be as quick as a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So to summarize that from a customer's perspective, if I'm looking at my options to exit what I've got currently, and that could be for a myriad of reasons, but let's say my licensing costs have shot up and I perhaps want to use that budget for internal initiatives or maybe generating more profit. It could be exiting a data center, it could be security reasons, it could be scalability reasons. So they can achieve all the things that Paul's fantastically set out for us there around non-intrusive, isn't going to spook your security team. The worst case is you're going to end up with more information that's going to feed into your options, so you know what your landscape is, building that into your roadmaps. Pulling back to what Paul Rhodes was saying around, well, you've got some information, you've got some great relevant data to take your internal people from your exec team right down to the people doing the work. You can take them on the journey.
You have to take the people, Sean.
Yeah, you have to, no doubt. It's all about the people. But what sounds like a great benefit of this, probably for a limited time, because we are in a flux of constant change constantly, is that there's huge incentives from the likes of AWS to get this rolling. So there's a minimum commitment from the customer where they're going to end up with more information using a unintrusive tool, and then they've got more options on the back of that.
And that's with no obligation to AWS. That's a key thing.
Just spotted there's a question in the chat, Sean, from Steve Corcoran.
Let's have a look. Steve Corcoran.
Oh, there we go.
Can you share an instance, an example when a non-intrusive assessment uncovered a big saving? I'm sure we can. What we're going to do with the Q&A in the chat is we've got some time at the end to cover off these, because there may be some more questions of a common theme emerging. But what I want to do is maybe we'll address some in the next section of this, which we're going to call a rapid risk roundup. So pulling on your expertise spanning many years around delivering. That's what we're talking about essentially. So it's all right having the data. It's all right getting to that point. It's even all right understanding the strategy and why we're doing it and infusing the people to get it done. But once you're in there, I'm fond of the term, the map's not the terrain. So once you're actually on the ground and working through the problems and making good use of the data, what would be a key takeaways and advice for navigating a big migration? Open panel, whoever blinks first has to answer.
I would say
I think it begins with the assessment piece, right? That we're talking about here is if you don't know what your strategy is going to be from the top, you need to identify a plan.
Yeah,
I think that's where you start.
you took my words then, but yeah, it's having that focus, having everybody aligned to that goal and understanding why they're doing it and what that means for them. It can mean many different things to many people involved in that journey within the organization, but actually having everybody pulling towards the one thing with full understanding of where you're starting from pays dividends towards the end.
And we've touched on the thread of taking people on the journey. Often with these things, certainly in the large organizations that have been around 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe even more years that carry that real interesting culture, right from the public and private sector. How would you work with people that want either things to stay the same? So I don't want to move my things that I'm familiar with, that I know how to operate, that potentially give me purpose. I want to keep things on-prem. Why should I move to the services that AWS offer?
Fear of the unknown is a common thing across. It's a human nature thing, not just in cloud migration, in any aspect of life where something new comes along that people have to adapt to or not adapt to. It's just understanding where that motivation is coming from, so you can articulate why it is of beneficial individually to people. I think once people understand what that means for them, and you start to remove the fear of that change, then you see people start to embrace it. And by embracing it, there's that effectively a change curve or cycles of change. And that's part of that step. And it's starting to, once you want to identify what that is and how that can be understood and nurtured in a positive way, then you see better results. People start to come on that journey. It's about getting on the journey, really.
Yeah, and Sean, I will just add to that as well that if you are, maybe you're right that something should be retained, and so what you want is an assessment that will identify what is the best 5R strategy. Okay, this thing should be retained, and this thing can be rehosted as is, but this thing needs to be replatformed, and here's some ways that we can do it effectively. That's really what the best type of assessment would be.
I think it's also the cultural piece, Sean, around the risk of doing nothing and understanding the true cost of what that could look like. For example, Kodak, right? Household name, was a decades-old organization, didn't adapt to the digital world, and is now a remnant of history.
Yeah, and there's a common theme building here, I think. If you've got the analysis, which we're about to see a tool, Matilda Cloud tool in action. Eric, get your keyboard ready. You do the analysis, you anchor that on the why. So why are we doing this? Get the buy-in, or acknowledge where there isn't buy-in. I think your point there, Paul, around maybe some workloads aren't appropriate, but at least you're building from solid data then, so you're removing some of the assumptions. So once you've got your why, once you're building your purpose, you've got actual data to build your approach on, and then step into it and navigate it with a good team. Good stuff. All right. Anything else to add before we hand over to Eric for a demo? Good stuff. All right, Eric. I will hand over to you at the end of Eric's segment here for the demo. We do plan to go to a Q&A. Anything that we don't get a chance to answer, we'll pick up in the chat or some of the feedback forms afterwards, and then send that out, likely with the recording and the follow-on points. So Eric, if you're ready, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So I'll walk through kind of a brief demo of our platform, starting with our discovery and assessment process. So as mentioned, we can perform discovery and assessment of on-premises, VMware environments, physical servers, other hypervisors, and of course, we can also do cloud-to-cloud assessments. So if a customer is on AWS, wants to move to Azure, vice versa, we support 4 major clouds, so AWS, Azure, GCP, and Oracle Cloud. From the perspective of our on-prem discovery, what happens is we do a deep analysis of the on-prem estates, including not just the VMs, but also what applications are running on those VMs, utilization information, dependencies, application awareness. So I'll just kind of walk through some kind of quick examples of that. This is our dashboard to the discover utilization or process. And there are reports we can create as well from the utensil here. But basically here we see some different details of the environments we captured, including hosts and OSs and services. And we have some different ways of kicking off our discovery. So there are VMware specific discoveries we can perform. What that means is we connect to the API of the vCenter servers, or we can import what's called RB tool, which is a third-party tool, which provides a template of all the vCenter ESX VMware kind of state information. So we can import that into the Matilda platform, perform an analysis very quickly, and provide some analysis in terms of the TCO and recommendations to move that environment into the cloud of choice. We also have what's called a network discovery. So what the network discovery does is you do kind of like a deeper dive assessment of the customer environment. And what happens here is we define what kind of network range we want to include in the discovery. So if you think about a data center or multiple data center environment, what's happening is we'll crawl that list of IP addresses or IP ranges and capture any relevant like on-premises VMs or servers that are present in that environment. And assuming you want to move forward with that assessment, we give you an option to kind of validate that or not. And in fact, I'll just pull that up real quick. We'll do what's called a pre-check, just kind of validate that we can see this list of machines. And if you want to move forward and do the discovery, there's a button here we'll click and that will begin the process. So really the discovery itself runs, like Paul mentioned, on an automated process. There's really no, other than initial setup, there's really no manual effort here required. And very minimal impact to the environment because we're not deploying any agents, we're not deploying any software to the target servers we're collecting. It's all done over network protocols. Our typical discovery for on-prem runs for around 2 weeks and sometimes 4 weeks, really to capture things like utilization information as well as network traffic, so we can build a dependency mapping of those different workloads and different applications. So ideally, 2 weeks is our recommendation, sometimes 4 weeks if it's a larger, more complex environment with lots of variables to make sure we capture those different utilization spikes and things like traffic variabilities. Once we complete that discovery of the 2 to 4 weeks, we run an automated assessment through the tooling. And there's a couple of different ways to look at the data we collect. One thing that we do is we perform an application assessment of the environment. And when I say application in this sense, what I mean is where you have things like application stacks. So you have, let's say, database servers, app servers, web servers, et cetera, where they're kind of working as an application stack. So what we do is we identify those different groupings. The only thing we don't know is the name of the application stack because those are customer specific business names they'll apply. So we can have the customer provide those names to make them more relevant to the customer. Otherwise, we'll provide generic naming for these applications. I'll just take a quick example though. So this is an application group we've called Billing App. Here we see we have seven nodes as part of this application. This is both physical and virtual. We see some capacity and utilization details here. We also will see what kind of services are comprised in this application. So the goal here is to understand what is the actual purpose of this application. So what are the components? Where do they live? What are the like version numbers? And also, do we have any concerns around end of service life? A lot of times with data center environments, especially older environments that have been around for 10, 20, 30 years, there will be some legacy OSs, legacy applications and databases. And so we'll uncover that through the process here of our discovery and also identify where we want to potentially upgrade those or replatform those as part of this modernization process to move into cloud. So like in this case, we see we have some databases here that expired last year. So we're providing some recommendations on kind of best practice guidance. In this case, I've got AWS selected as the target. And so we're recommending document database as the path service for this particular database. Similarly, we have some applications that are just kind of near end of service life. So we might want to upgrade those as part of this process of moving to the cloud to make sure we're supported long-term for this application. And then we'll also provide what we call a connection mapping. So this is really more like dependency mapping from within the application group itself. And you'll see there's different tiers. So we kind of break it down. We have our app tier, our database tier, and our infrastructure tier. And what's happening is during the collection process, we're capturing things like network communication. We capture the different frequency of connections, the different patterns that are taking place between the different components of the application. And this is an interactive map, so we can see what the connections are, what ports are being used, what services are being used. And the goal here really is to, as mentioned, to make sure we fully understand the on-prem environment, the application landscape before we migrate, because we may not just be moving VMs per se. So we might be moving applications. We might want to incorporate other options like replatform, re-architect into the strategy to migrate. And so these findings kind of help lead to that kind of end goal to modernize these workloads. And on top of that, making sure we have the understanding in terms of landing zone creation, what kind of VPCs or firewall ports or load balancers are required to support this application when we move this into the cloud environment. There might be some differences from on-prem to cloud, of course, so we want to kind of reflect the current state, and then we can make the best decision on how to migrate this into the cloud environment, what kind of resources are required to accommodate this application. And we'll even uncover what we call here unknown. So these are essentially communication patterns that we're identifying that are occurring outside of the customer network. So these could be like external repositories or another cloud environment. And so just really more food for thought. So we want to make sure if these are required for the application to function, that we allow that traffic when we move it to the cloud. So we might have a firewall rule or different settings to allow that connection to maintain once we move this estate into the cloud environment. There's different views here. I won't go through all this, but there's a topology view, which kind of shows us a breakout of the different components. So we have here's our VMs and servers, here's our services and databases. And this allows us to kind of dig deeper into those application components. So here we see we have a WebSphere application, and we can see the different subcomponents and sub-applications that are part of this particular workload. So really, just like I said, just to understand that application, if you need to dig deeper into something, really fully understand it before you migrate it, this gives it that real-time analysis of the application. And I'll mention too, right? Sometimes you may have diagrams or architectures that were built for certain applications, but that might have been 5 or 10 years ago. And there could be things like shadow IT, or there could be different modifications that are taking place over time to those applications. So this will give us that real-time analysis. So we know currently, right now, what this application is running, what the requirements are, what the dependencies are as it is today. And similarly, we'll do a dependency mapping from the perspective of the application group. And what I mean by this is we have these different application groups where we see dependencies occurring from this particular group we're looking at right now. And so what happens is when we move into the migration planning phase, we want to kind of prepare our migration groupings. We'll use this information to identify where those groupings might want to occur. So where we have dependencies, what the strategy is, and we'll kind of incorporate those different findings to prepare for that migration plan for when you move this into the cloud environment. That way, we're not missing anything. We're not, potentially causing disruptions or affecting, those dependent applications as we migrate these. And I'll skip ahead a couple screens here to the sizing. So the sizing is where we will provide the what-if scenario. So if we decide to take this application, move it in the cloud, and by the way, we can select the different clouds here as well. So if you are looking at different options, it's very easy to kind of toggle between different providers and see the different options. But here we see AWS as a target. We see our source environment on the left side. We see our recommendations in the middle pane here. So we see some that are re-platform, some that are rehost. So what happens essentially is we will look at each application component or subcomponent and see if there's a compatible service in the target cloud. In some cases, it might be rehost because there's not a compatible service, or if there is, we'll show re-platform. So rehost would be like going to EC2 or Azure VM. And of course, we'll provide the instance type and size details, so the kind of shape and size details, along with the TCO analysis, which is per region, so we can update the region to show the appropriate region for the customer. And we'll also show, like I said, re-platform in the case of applications where there's a platform as a service available to migrate this. In this case, like Azure Document Database, or it could be, Amazon Document Database, or it could be Azure Cosmos DB as an example. So I'll show different options there. What happens is we have a very deep category or comprehensive list of all the different applications and services available in the cloud provider. So we reference that during this analysis automatically. So we kind of like a filter we go through to identify what is the appropriate target for each application component. And we do right sizing, of course, so we'll look at both right sizing and we can provide like to like as well. So if there's a situation where you do want to just get everything over as quickly as possible, we can do that. But obviously, we want to provide those different options, different recommendations, where we kind of analyze what is the best option for for your environment. So that's kind of a quick example of an application view. And of course, we have various different dashboard views here too, just to show you a couple examples here. So we have kind of our overall perspective of the environment. Here's what we captured. Here's how many VMs and servers. Here's our TCO analysis for on-prem as well as for cloud. The on-prem analysis is based on Gartner industry standard numbers. So we'll provide an estimate for the on-prem cost. And then we'll provide, of course, the cloud cost based on the region selected for that cloud region. We also will show instance level details. So if we want to dive deep into a specific VM or server, we can go in and kind of analyze the utilization details. We can analyze things like dependency mapping on the per node basis or per VM basis. So we see kind of where we have different dependencies within this environment, within this particular workload. There's, of course, services where we identify what is the actual kind of role of each server. Like in this case, it's a database server. And that kind of helps go into our kind of sizing recommendations or instance type recommendations if we were to rehost this. So we kind of know what is the role, what kind of compute type is required to migrate this into. So lots of details. I'll go through all this, but you can see there's storage, network, and all kinds of different categories here. And what I'm showing you here is the dashboard view. There is also a lot of reporting we can create through the tooling. One of those is an inventory report, which will kind of profile all the different details here into a spreadsheet format. So you can more easily kind of share this with different team members and kind of analyze the data, do all kinds of things with the data we collect. And there's services level analysis and database level analysis. So this really kind of dissects what kind of services are running in the environment, like container services, app services, web services. And this allows us to also kind of dig deep into specific application components. Like here we have a container service, Kubernetes. We see our containers, we see our nodes, our namespaces, et cetera. So it allows us to really dig into those application components and really see what is running behind the scenes for each of these components. So lots of information available here. And like I said, same with databases. We can do a database analysis too. So all the different Oracle databases, SQL databases, et cetera. We can analyze those and just take a quick example here where we see all kinds of database schema details. We see performance metrics from the database, dependency mapping from the perspective of the database. So just really giving us all those different angles of the perspective of the databases and applications so we can make an informed decision when we go about migrating these. And like I mentioned, there's a variety of reporting in the tooling as well. So I'll just take an example here. So this is an on-prem to cloud summary report that we create. This is created automatically through the tooling. And what this will do is kind of encapsulate all the findings of that assessment into one kind of high-level summary of the environment. So we see, for example, our on-prem environment, how many hosts did we capture, what is our TCO, what does our target look like from a TCO perspective, and of course, we'll dig deeper into those areas here too. So let me expand that a little bit. So we see, for example, our on-prem spend or on-demand 1 year and 3 year TCO analysis. And that can be both like to like and right size. We see what kind of potential savings we're seeing by moving this environment into the cloud. Like I said, we do provide right sizing and optimization techniques and recommendations as part of the TCO analysis. So typically when you move to cloud, you're probably going to do some optimization. So we do provide those recommendations on where you can optimize. And that could be things like you've got orphan resources, you can maybe decommission. It could be where you might want to right size certain workloads or move to a different service that is more cost effective. So we'll identify those kind of situations to provide the best, your most cost effective approach. And you can kind of weigh that too. You want to look more for performance or more for cost. You can kind of weigh those different options within the tooling. And another thing that I like here too is we'll show the service level mapping. For example, we see our on-prem servers, which could go into EC2, but we also see things like container services, database services, where there is a corresponding platform as a service we can move to. And so we see the TCO analysis for those as well. So just kind of want to make sure we provide all the different insights. And when you go to the report, there's all kinds of different breakouts here. I won't go through the whole thing, but we see all kinds of details of the captured information and of service life information, usage analysis. So we'll look at a very detailed right sizing of the different workloads. But yeah, this just kind of gives us all those different categories, and we kind of break it out here so we know what we're currently running and what the recommendations are. And if I go down to the bottom here, we also will provide a migration strategy. So we do look at 7 R's of the different strategies. So rehost, replatform, re-architect, retain, retire, et cetera. So here we see some wave group planning that is based on the findings. This is our initial guidance for the migration wave groups or move groups. So what happens here is we're looking at the different dependencies, the different environments like prod or non-prod, the different strategies for migration, and providing an initial recommendation for those migration wave groups. Now, this might require some finessing based on customer priorities and things like that. But the idea here is to kind of accelerate that timeline, know where we have dependencies, so we can kind of move into the migration phase more quickly based on what we encountered during the assessment. So that's a kind of a high level of discovery. We do have migration as well, like I mentioned. So we have a separate kind of dashboard for that. And what this will do is take the results of our discovery process and incorporate that into our migration. So essentially, this is kind of a subset of that. But we'll see like our different waves that we identified within the planning of our discovery and our different applications that we encountered. And what happens here is this is a tooling that allows us to essentially migrate those, incorporating those different wave groups, essentially kind of a block level replication, so we can actually do the migration of those workloads into the target cloud. That could be, like I said, Azure, AWS, GCP, OCI. And so this essentially allows us to coordinate that migration by leveraging that output from the discovery and assessment that we performed. So this is really kind of a way we can kind of select our different waves, and we can schedule these, or we can initiate any kind of replication or test environment within the cloud very quickly and easy to initiate that migration and cutover of those workloads. And just lastly, just want to touch on the cloud to cloud just real briefly. So we do have, like I mentioned, cloud to cloud analysis. So this is an example of AWS to Azure. And what you'll notice, it's very similar to the on-prem to cloud report that we looked at. So we see the spend details, we see the target cloud spend details. We'll do analysis of the different services and resources running the current cloud. In this case, we see things like storage and compute and databases. And we see our potential savings for this environment by moving to the cloud, or from current cloud into the target cloud. So what happens here is we'll kind of go through a deep analysis. We'll identify all the different cost and usage information of that source cloud environment, so we have accurate references from the customer actual billing that we're seeing. And then we'll provide kind of a mapping to, I'm going to scroll down. So we'll provide a mapping of the different resources that were identified in the source cloud and what the corresponding target cloud resource and cost would be. So this gives us that kind of benchmark. And this goes through all kinds of details. I know we're probably got to pause here for this question Q&A, but it goes through all kinds of different areas like the framework, anomalies, and all the different kind of categories of consumption that we identified. So really kind of giving us a nice understanding of the current environment and allowing us to really transcend into that migration very quickly. So hopefully that kind of helps give us kind of a quick high-level view of the assessment and kind of touch on migration there. I'll hand it back over to Sean for the Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Hey, it really brings it to life. You know, we've talked about the benefits of the analysis. We've seen a live example of an interactive tool that gives the dashboard that customers can use to work with their teams to understand what's there, what they're going to do with it, and then do a lot of that upfront heavy lifting for the migrations, you know, on the back of the landing zone build. It's good to see, really good to see. Thank you for that. Okay, so Q&A, we've got about 7 minutes left and we will finish on time. So any questions that we don't get to, we will follow up. We had some submitted prior to the start of this session as well. We do have a couple in the chat. So I think Paul Gordon, you've touched on the first one that we have. Just to summarize, can you share an instance or an example when a non-intrusive assessment uncovered a big saving? Can you just give us an overview of that?
Yeah, I think what Steve is looking for is maybe a case study, which is something that, you know, we have a lot of case studies that are published on our website. I'm always working to publish more, and I would love if we could work on some together, that would be excellent too, just to share the specifics. But in general, you know, if cost savings is what your enterprise is looking for, then we approach the project from a lens of how can we save costs. So we can evaluate what this transition would look like from one cloud to another, from a data center to a specific cloud. And we go about it from the lens of cost savings to identify where those are. So if you want to see this assessment for the purpose of cost saving, you know, what you'll find when you read through our case studies is sometimes there's a cost savings need, but a lot of our customers, they have other business goals as well. So you know, there's a whole multitude of reasons why you would do this. So you run the assessment to identify where those opportunities are that you're looking for. And so cost savings is a great one. I think everyone's interested in cost savings, no matter what the economic environment. If you have an existing cloud environment, the best way to do cost savings is to run our in-place assessment on optimization, which Eric did not show. But if you're assessing like a VMware project, maybe it's your license costs or a renewal deadline that you're up against. So maybe speed and cost are the goals. So really, the way I would answer it is, whatever your goals are, the cost savings is one of those areas that we can look at it from that lens.
Yeah, definitely. Well, nobody wants to spend more, I think, and kind of get the same service or less. So, I think if cost is related to value and then meeting those objectives, which has been the theme, why we're doing this to start with, how does that align and how can we prove it? Eric, I can see you're sharing your screen there.
Yeah, so I thought I'd bring up the dashboard real quick to optimize, because that's what kind of Paul was referring to with our optimization of in-place cloud environments. And what this is showing us is some of the high-level details of a kind of customer cloud environment. And what we have here also is a FinOps component where we can track cost and usage information over a period of time, and also do projections like what is the next forecast for the next 3 months, next 6 months, and allow us to kind of really pinpoint what areas are growing, what areas are shrinking in terms of cost consumption. And it's very interactive. We can dive into all the way down to the specific resource, see what kind of sizing recommendations we recommend. It could be a VM, it could be any kind of resource where we have different sizing requirements, and also things like security best practices. So it's looking at the whole environment and identifying where do we want to optimize this across the board, what kind of areas do we recommend. And like I said, we can look high level, we can also dive into specific areas.
Yeah, that's useful. And again, that starts with having the information to start with. What have I got? What are my options? And how can I meet those objectives? So conscious of time, 4 minutes left. I'm going to pull another one from the Q&A. This one's again for the Matilda team, so keep your mics open. Out of interest, what's your most common migration use case to date? Is it on-prem to AWS or AWS to Azure?
It's a mix. We help transition to any cloud and from any source. So it's really a question of, where do our customers tend to go? I think a lot of customers are trying to get out of VMware and into AWS or Azure. A fair bit of them are trying to evaluate a strategy into Oracle. I think that's kind of a unique one. But really, it's where are you and what are your goals? If your goals are cost savings, we can evaluate the different strategies that can get you there. If the goal is scalability and you want to evaluate replatforming scenarios into Kubernetes, if you're in Pivotal Cloud Foundry, for example, we have clients in Pivotal Cloud Foundry that there's no other automated solution for, then we can evaluate what are the replatforming scenarios to AWS, for example, if you want to take advantage of a managed Kubernetes service. So we have a wide number of use cases, and it starts again from what are your business priorities and business outcomes that you're trying to prioritize.
Yeah, goes back to what's your why, then let's figure out what the options are to get there. Which I think from Eric, from what you were showing on that last slide, it's good to have that comparison as well, to work through that with the customer so they understand what those options are. 2 minutes left. Paul Rhodes, I'm going to come to you on this one. And if you can wrap us up in 2 minutes, that would be very useful. So we've got here, what challenges do you face when the customer uses a third party to manage their estate, such as Infosys or NTT? I believe you may have had some experience in this recently.
Yeah. Again, it's been very clear with that. So managing third-party suppliers in a large, complex engagement or migration has its challenges, but they're not majorly different to an in-house IT team in lots of ways. There are some obviously contractual differences, but the big challenge is making sure, again, I think I mentioned it many times, is actually ensuring everybody understands what the goals are and understands what the business objectives are for doing this piece of work, and aligning to that and making sure, almost behaving as one team. There's multiple partners and suppliers within that program delivery is making sure and making the governance correct to ensure that the all aspects of that program are operating in one direction, and that includes any third parties or suppliers that are engaged by the organisation.
Good stuff. So great orchestration, a good delivery wrapper, bringing people together internally and externally, and working with great systems. And with that in mind, I've got 1 minute to wrap us up. I'll just I'll take us past 5. So quick recap: great analysis up front, and ongoing analysis and working from real data is critical. Significant funding is available, but act on it, because it might not last. And the delivery management and taking people on the journey, working with great partners, cutting edge tools, orchestrating the internal and the external, but really focusing on the why for the customer makes these things a success. So thank you to everybody that's joined. Thank you to everybody that's watching the recording. I would encourage you to reach out to us via the website, on LinkedIn, in whatever means necessary, and have a chat about what it means for your company's journey, your own personal role, and how you can give yourself more options and more information without overcommitting. So with that in mind, thank you to Paul Gordon, Eric, Kev, Paul Rhodes, all the support team in the background, and again, thank you for everybody for joining. Go well and good luck with your migrations.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.